education, rather than straight information delivery and individual counselling. Having said that, it's very artificial to draw boundaries, as you're all probably aware. For a start, how do you actually define rural, regional and remote? That's always a question. How do you actually put a boundary around education when information delivery and individual counselling are often required as part of the package as well? And finally, interactivity is a contested term because you can be extremely passive in quite a dynamic, interactive environment such as a webinar. So the methods that I've been using have been, well, first of all, interviews. I've had about 30 interviews. All of the presenters have taken part in interviews with me, and there are many others of you in the forum who have also been a part of my project. So I'd like to thank you all, and I hope that my presentation really is just a broad introduction to the kinds of issues and detail that you're going to develop further in your own presentations. We've been conducting several trials as well, and some of you are probably aware that the Centre runs regular video conferences, and we've used this as a way to extend the access to those video conferences to more remote people so they don't have to come into regional centres. So we tried Jabber, not very successfully, and then more recently we've been using Scopia. We've been linking in through the Victoria Legal Aid video conferencing system, and that's been working really well. So people can just use a URL to connect into the video conferencing system. We've also been using Twitter and SMS to try and introduce a bit of a channel for interaction between the presenters and the audience, or vice versa, I should say. I've also run a couple of webinars using different technologies and different sort of management approaches, and today's forum is also a trial of having synchronous blended audiences in both a virtual sense and the face-to-face sense. So I hope you'll bear with us if there are technical glitches and other sort of imperfections in our delivery today. Perhaps see them as an opportunity to learn about the possibilities and the difficulties associated with this kind of mode. So webinars and video conferences has been a main focus of mine, and I've found that it's really in a state of flux, this area. There are many products, both simple, at the simple end, which is like Skype, a lot of people use that successfully, right through to highly sophisticated custom-made solutions which can cost several $1,000s a month and offer you virtually any form of interaction online that you're after. And in between, the commercial products such as GoToWebinar, Adobe Connect, WebEx, which some of you are probably familiar with, are improving their features all the time. There have been significant advances in these technologies in recent years, which have meant that there's really been a kind of converging in the area. So what used to be seen as a video conference kind of characteristic, where you have a webcast to large numbers of people, is now possible through webinar technology. A lot of the commercial webinar programs, the really high-end ones, can cater for up to 1,000 participants, depending on server capability. And at the other end, the webinar sort of characteristics which we're used to, the high interactivity with text and audio, is becoming possible in video conferences. Like you can connect in remotely, and with the Deakin situation, we're in a few months' time going to be able to provide access to the Deakin video conferencing system through Link, so you'll have all the functionality associated with Link available to anyone remotely, because we're quite remote. Okay. There are, of course, limiting factors and payoffs with these features. I mean, I seriously doubt whether you can actually have a system that will give you everything, because for a start, if you want to have a lot of interactivity, then you can't have a large number of people taking part, because interactivity takes time. If you're going to have real communication and feedback and trialling new ideas, then that's not something you can do quickly. Also, if you allow people to speak in real time, then you open the possibility for loud blaring noises from the audience, which, if you've been in webinars where that's happened, it's a real killer. So, anyone who's in this area trying to decide what sort of webinar product or video conference product to go for, it's quite a difficult process to decide, because while they offer a lot of features, they are actually there are differences, and you need to trial a few. They take a while to master, and they're changing all the time as well. As part of my project, I'm going to be putting together some guidelines, a matrix to sort of go with the guidelines, and that will set out for about 10 of the most popular products, about 10 of the most desirable characteristics in webinars and video conferences, and then people will be better able to choose, hopefully, according to what they need. Having said all that about convergence, they're also seeking to differentiate themselves in the market. So, for example, on the right here we have a screen grab taken from one of our webinars, which is in GoToWebinar, and you can see it looks very, very different to the Scopia interface, which is the hybrid that Deakin's using at the moment, and that's different also to the link screen, which we've got up here. I mean, that's not showing the text at the moment, but you can see the way they configure the screen is different, and they also work differently. So that kind of adds to the, I guess, the difficulty of choosing. You need to sort of choose a platform that works well for you. How to use webinars and video conferences to best advantage is also an area that there's been quite a lot of work done in recently. And I've spoken with a few law educators about this issue, and they say, well, it's interesting because a lot of law is delivered in lecture format, and that really goes down quite well because most lawyers learnt that way and they don't actually expect anything else. But furthermore, a lot of law content is highly technical, and the lecture format can work quite well for just delivering a whole lot of technical information about updates to legislation and that kind of thing. And particularly if there's an opportunity to ask questions within that, then a lot of people would be satisfied with that. However, there are other areas of law that don't fit particularly well that kind of learning design. For example, if you're wanting to discuss ethics, then you really would want to have a small group discussion sort of situation. If you're wanting to develop people's negotiation and conflict management skills, then normally you'd use a role play. And you can do these things in webinars and video conferences, but they sort of take a bit of skill and confidence and a lot of flexibility. So, for example, in webinars you can have breakout rooms in some products, and you can then host sort of small group discussions and practicing in role plays and that kind of thing in those kinds of environments, and then come together in the whole group. In video conferences, if you have a moderator in each of the regional centres, you can achieve a similar sort of thing. So you can tease out sort of the regional issues and talk about local cases and that kind of thing that can really enliven an education session. Of course, there are other ways of educating and contacting and accessing rural, remote, regional people. It's not just webinars and video conferences. I mean, websites, mobile apps, email and phone are still very much in play. And I'm putting together this kind of broad matrix as well, which is still sort of in an early stage. I've sort of coded the cells. So across the top we have the different sort of broad technology areas, and down the side we have the main sort of considerations you might have as an educator wanting to access particular audiences with particular type of content or subject matter. And then if it's a green, sort of a dark green shaded cell, then that indicates that tool or that sort of technology area is likely to produce, likely to support that kind of feature. So, for example, if you had an audience with very low bandwidth, you might be able to choose a webinar because that's sort of got a mid colour, depending on which kind of product you chose, because you would need to choose one of the products with the software that allows low bandwidth users to connect, because not all of them have that, a lot of them do. On the other hand, you would really be good to, well advised to support the whole thing with information in a website and perhaps email and phone as well. Often I'm finding that people are saying a combination works best. It's just, isn't it? Okay. I've really got so much to say about my research, and we're into question time already. So I'll just leave you with some of the quotes, some pertinent quotes from my interviews, and while Helen comes up and prepares herself, if that's okay. If you've got a question, please feel free to ask it now, or perhaps you'd like to just engage with one or more of these sort of issues that have been raised in my research.
through on you, Martin, at all? Was there any questions or observations?
No, just observation.
Got a comment or a question at this point?
No, not questions, just observations that it's coming through really good.
Okay, that's
People
good.
hearing things and seeing things, absolutely. So
Perhaps we could put the text up.
you might want to put the text channel up so
Okay.
people can see what's going on.
Yeah, look, I'm just Dale Holt and I'm working on the project as well, so Richard just asked me to help moderate the session. One thing we were talking about at the table over here is certain organisations really don't have access to the sort of infrastructure that we have at Deakin. And you mentioned on the slide, Mary, we've got 12 regional centres or, distributed learning hubs through rural regional Victoria. It's almost one, maybe you, Martin, but I think you were saying, to what extent can other parties get access to Deakin infrastructure to run these types of events? Maybe it's a future service that Deakin could provide.
Yep.
Is that reasonable?
Look, I mean, at the moment, I guess it's not a service that Deakin provides, but I think it's a reasonable proposition, absolutely, that could be approached.
Can I just add something up? I suppose we need to be
We do, yes. We're just having a conversation between Dr. Dale Holt, who's moderating the session, and Martin Bramwick, who's our technical expert, and now Richard's going to take over.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, look, just in terms of the forums that we run, they are open to others to utilise. I guess we would be looking as a partnership, so it would need to be something that's relevant to rural and regional communities, and it would need to be law and justice related. But we're very interested in doing that. We're already running a number with a range of organisations, from the Institute of Company Directors through to, we're about to run one with the Ombudsman. We've run several, one with Pilch, sorry, what's it called? Justice Connect. So yes, we're interested in those sorts of partnerships, and while there are 12 currently, 12 locations, we also, as indicated, are trialling a number of other methods. So it's not necessarily just limited to those 12 locations, and it's also, we're looking to make it available at individual home office sites as well.
Okay.